There ain't no project like a haunted house project because the haunted house project don't stop. All right, enough silliness. Today on Rotted Review of the Day, we're going to be taking a spoiler free look at the 2010 Korean film The Haunted House Project. I wanted to watch an Asian horror film. I love Asian horror films, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, even Thai horror films. I absolutely adore, uh, just on a slightly different level than your traditional American horror films. The nature behind them, the mythos, and the ghoulishness that they tend to bring to the table, I have a real love for. That's not to say that they are without their faults, and I will not be judging them in any different manner than I would any other movie. I'm not averse to subtitles at all. Some of you are, and that's all right. I got no issue with that. But the thing I wasn't expecting with this movie, because I honestly didn't know anything about it going into it, like I tend to try to do, is that it is a found footage movie. And as the first review I did, the nature of found footage can be a contentious one in the horror world. Regardless, I thought that this one was done fairly well, and the scares that it provided, I was genuinely surprised by. But it did not get a perfect score all around. And speaking of scoring, we're going to go ahead and dive right into that. As usual, 5 categories worth up to 20 points each for a total possible score of 100 points. Let's get into it. The plot. This is the portion of the film that fell down the most. It didn't really have one. This was strictly by the numbers. Documentary crew wants to go in and film a supposed haunted house to try and capture something and wind up out of their depth. Um, the I think the thing that I guess the hook behind this one is that the documentary crew doesn't really necessarily believe or want to believe one way or the other. The actual haunted house investigators are a group of 3 teenagers that they happen to just hire on to be in front of the camera doing what they do. The documentary crew seemed more objective and not necessarily goal oriented as far as finding anything. They just were wanting to capture. Um, they were more interested in watching the young investigators do what they do more than capturing paranormal activity. Uh, but I mean, that's not a huge leap. Ultimately, you still wind up at the same place where you're in a haunted environment with the camera crew and first person shots, and things go wrong. Um, so it really didn't explore a whole lot. The backstory that they developed around the haunted house was interesting in its detail level, but didn't really lend itself to any kind of plot or story structure or character development, anything like that. I really couldn't give it a whole lot higher than a 5. This was strictly run and be scared kind of thing. Um, the intent behind it, as far as run and be scared, they did that very well. The setting I thought was very, very good. The haunted house, as it were, was a it was kind of a combination of buildings. It was a factory, a an old abandoned factory workers dormitory, and a house on the same property for the owner of the factory and his family, and the backstory that they developed centered around the tragedy of that family and uh, the nature of everything, and the aesthetic of the abandoned properties I thought was very, very good. It was something that you don't often see in haunted house movies or even derelict houses in movies. They were truly dilapidated to the point where I was wondering how they got away with filming them without endangering the safety of the crew. I mean, behind the scenes and actually making this movie. So yeah, I had to give some pretty strong kudos to that, and what they intended to do, they did, and so 16 points out of 20 for intent. They had some marvelous scares, some marvelous jump scares, some wonderful little technical moments, and yeah, hats off to them on that. The acting, I went ahead and gave this a 12. I really couldn't get it a whole lot higher than that, but I didn't feel it was fair to judge it any lower either. The acting was not bad. It was very good. There was just such a limited amount they had to work with. Like I said, this was be behind the camera, be in front of the camera, and look scared. You know, that was it. That I mean that could serve as the direction. Go ahead and pick this up and be scared. Go ahead and walk, 3 steps to your left and be scared. And they did that well, but I can't really, judge beyond a 12 considering the range that we dove into in the Haunted House Project. Effects. I gave this one a 15. I thought the effects were very solid. Clearly a little bit of CG work in there, clearly, some camera manipulation. But that was almost the point. There was one portion in particular, without giving anything away, because this is spoiler free. I forgot to mention that there will be a deep dive discussion video where there will be spoilers abound if you've already seen the movie and you want to go into it further. But there is one portion of the movie that I have seen done a few times before, in terms of characters being dragged into blackness. I have never seen it done exactly this way before, and it was very effective. I thought it was a great moment in this movie, and just in the effect of how they accomplished it. Yeah, I'll go into that in the deep dive, but yeah, effects I gave a 15 out of 20. I got no real complaints about it. Just that it wasn't an effect laden movie, which I've been saying about several of the videos that I've been reviewing, and I should really try to make it a point on the next one to have it an effect laden movie. Not necessarily to score it high, but to be able to have something to compare it, and have a good score without worrying about the vapidness of the category. Moving on though, the fear quotient, which for me is the big one. And when you watch a horror movie, it doesn't always have to be scary, but I think that it's a critical enough function that it needs to be its own category, and it needs to be a bar in which every horror movie is judged. And this one, I went ahead and gave it a 13 out of 20. There were some jump scares in there that were very effective. I had goosebumps. I love that. But there were also many, many instances of jump scares where you saw it coming. It wasn't a huge surprise. And I mean, they had a technical element to it of the footage being distorted and then digitally restored. But even so, when we found this, it was almost beyond repair kind of thing, that caused more distortion when you knew something was about to happen. That effect there was good, but it did break the tension of something happening when you weren't expecting it. Then they still had those moments, but the fact that many of the scary moments had a precursor of, like, well, up to and pay attention, something's about to happen, takes you out of it a little bit. Takes the surprise away, and jump scares are all about surprise. That's the art of the timing on those. So, if you don't mind subtitles, I do recommend the Haunted House Project. Not the best movie in the world, certainly not the best Asian horror film in the world, but I think it's respectable. I'd like to see Asian horror get back to where it was. It seems like they kind of had their big glory days in the early 2000s up until 2008, 2009, and it seems like we've seen a little bit of a quantity and quality drop off. I'd love to see it get back to where it came from. and well, not it's not where it came from, but I'd like to see it make a resurgence because, like I said, I do love it. So total score of 61 out of a possible 100 points. Yeah, still within my recommended range. Yeah, and by all accounts, just go ahead and give it a whirl. So we're going to go ahead and do the deep dive discussion, where we're going to talk about more critical elements of it, more plot-related elements, and further into the effects, discussing specific scenes that I didn't want to give away here. So that should do it for about this time. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.